Okay, we're going to start today by Ibaylahu on the bottom of page Tzadik, page 90. Thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. So we're learning, we should have the base of Mikdash immediately. Learning the Nishma, Sav Golda Basbar, Binyamin, and the Sanal Sev Ben Benzian, the four Shlema Avram David Ben Sarah. Whoever else needs a four Shlema. Okay. So, what is this about 12 lines from the bottom? Yeah, Ibaylahu. We've been talking about workers eating in the field. We're also talking about not to muzzle an animal. So the Gemara starts off, Ibaylahu, is a person allowed to tell a non-Jew, put a muzzle on my animal and do the threshing? Rashi, in one interpretation of Taisvis, is that it's talking about he wants the non-Jew to do the threshing of his own grain, and he's just going to get a non-Jew to do it. So that's going to be the animal won't eat anything, and he won't have the prohibition because the non-Jew is doing it. So mi amrinan, should we say that there's a rabbinic prohibition to get a non-Jew to do work for you, to do something for you, do a malacha? Hanimilin in Shabbos, this is skill. That's only regarding Shabbos, where there's a prohibition of that would incur stoning, a capital punishment. Aval chasima, but just to muzzle an animal when it's threshing the grain, then the Isser Lav, that's only a negative prohibition. We don't say that there's a prohibition to get a non-Jew to do it. Or maybe there's no difference. It's the same thing. If you can't get a non-Jew to do work for you on Shabbos, you're also not allowed to get a non-Jew to thresh the grain with the animal muzzle. Okay, a very interesting question about if you can get a non-Jew to do other types of prohibited things for you. That's another interpretation of Taisvis. The Ri says that it's the non-Jews. Rashi and the first Pshat in Taisvis say that it's the Jews. Yeah.
If it would belong to the Jews, there's no to the non-Jews.
According to this interpretation, according to the Ri, it depends how you want to learn this Gemara. There's different ways of learning this Gemara. Yeah. Okay. Tashima, so come and listen. They only bring one interpretation. They don't bring the other interpretation.
But it has the whole thing. Then it mentions what Rashi said.
Okay, fine.
After, but from what I see here, it's like the whole thing. If the Jew benefits, he's not allowed, and then if the non-Jew benefits, it's okay.
That means it does belong to the Jew.
Both cases, because here, you see, 26, and then it leads me to 28. 28 has more.
Rashi. Oh, so Rashi's saying Disha Shalach. Oh, Rashi's saying the opposite. Rashi and the Ri are saying the same thing. Okay, I see what you're saying. Thank you. Rashi and the Ri are saying the same thing. Disha Shalach. Okay, but the Taisvis in his first Pshat doesn't say that. And then what are you telling me? There's another note here?
Yeah, 26 leads to 28. And 28 is the one that has all the explanation.
Yeah. Other Rishonim. Okay, fine. They have both interpretations. Okay. So Tashima, come and listen. Nachri Adash Bepersa Shel Yisrael. A non-Jew is threshing with a Jewish cow. The cow is owned by a Jew, and he's using the cow. The Jew, obviously, doesn't get the prohibition of Bal Tachsim, of not to muzzle the animal when it's threshing. But the Gemara elaborates on this brisa, and it says Me'abahu d'layava. he doesn't get the prohibition, but still that would be he doesn't get the prohibition after the fact, but he still isn't allowed to instruct him to do it. Or else it would have said you're allowed to instruct him to do it. Here it's saying that, he doesn't get the prohibition, but the instructing is probably a problem as well. It's probably a problem. The Gemara answers, really, there's no problem even to instruct him. Why did the Seifa? But since the later case said, that Brisa, Yisrael Hadash that if the Jewish person uses a non-Jewish owned cow to thresh, he would violate the prohibition. Yeah, but why is it even a discussion? There's a benefit to the animal if you let it eat. So what he's doing is he's taking an animal that doesn't belong to him and he's not letting it eat. To say, well, it's only if it's only if it's your own animal. They're saying, no. It doesn't matter whose animal it is, even if the animal belongs to a non-Jew. If you don't let it eat, if you muzzle it while it's threshing, then you get the prohibition. Now, since over there it says oiver, that there you get the prohibition, that means that so since it says oiver over there, you get the prohibition. So in the other case, when we wanted to say that you're not oiver, we said the term not oiver, and we didn't use the term chatchila, you're allowed to instruct. Initially allowed to. Like in others, it's just explaining that it was doing a compare and contrast, even though if we would have said this independently, we would have used a different language.
The prohibition was just for plowing.
It's not plowing. It's not plowing. It's like plowing. There's no food there to eat.
Oh, okay.
It's when you thresh. Like plowing, there's another prohibition, not to have two animals that are of different kinds together. But the threshing is you can't muzzle it because it's working. It's stepping on the grain.
And
that's when it would want to eat it.
Uh-huh.
That's why it used the term Oiver, because of the way it to make the brisa symmetrical.
So I guess the animal will just keep eating until it's full.
Right. Yeah, it eats while it does stuff. Yeah. That's it. Is to yell at us, chew gum. What are you, an animal?
I have no idea. Yeah, now that you mentioned that, the animal wouldn't overeat and not want to work.
The animal eats all day. I mean, it could get full, it could slow down, but it basically eats all day. That's the dogs in the city.
Yeah.
The dogs out there in the country are different. They're running around. Okay. Toshima. Come and listen. The Sholchale Lavua de Shmuel. They asked the father of Shmuel, Halin Turi, these oxen, the Ganvin Armoi Umin Ganchen Yasain Mahu, that gets stolen by these Arameans, the non-Jews steal them and they castrate them. What is the law? Now they're stealing them because they're friendly with their Jewish neighbors and they want to castrate the animals. And the only thing is that the Jews are not allowed to do it. So these non-Jews are doing a favor to the Jews by stealing the animals without their permission and castrating them and then returning it. So yeah, I stole your animal. So what's the halacha? They asked Avu the Shmuel. Yeah, shalach lo. So he sends back Harama Savadbu. They did a trick. Arimu alayu v'yisdabnan. We'll do a trick on them, and the ruling will be that they have to sell it. They're not allowed to keep it. Apparently, it was better for plowing if they were castrated. Amar Rav Papa says, "B'nei Marav Sabri l'Rab Chidka." Oh, so the problem over here is what we're seeing over here. In other words, this is a proof that a non-Jew, you're not allowed to tell a non-Jew to do a prohibition. Not only on Shabbos, even on with other laws. For example, The same thing should apply to the castrating the animal or muzzling or putting a muzzle on the animal when it's threshing. Same thing should apply. Shouldn't be allowed to tell it. You see that we said that it's prohibited. Amarav Papa, so Rav Papa explains, no, you can't make that comparison because the people that asked this question must mean the Bnei Marava. I'm not sure why we're saying the Bnei Marava. People from Eretz Yisrael, they held like Reb Chitka, and Reb Chitka has his opinion is in Sanhedrin Damar Bnei Nayach Mitzavan al Asiris that non-Jews are also not allowed to castrate an animal. It applies to non-Jews as well. And when a Jewish person would tell them to do it, it would be lifnei iver. It would be not to put a stumbling block in front of a blind person, which applies and is referring to causing someone else to commit a prohibition. So what we're saying here is that why do we put this penalty on them that they have to sell it? That's only because they themselves are actually prohibited from doing it, but they are not prohibited from muzzling an animal. So if that's the case, when it comes to muzzling the animal, if you tell a non-Jew to do it, could be that's acceptable. Why can't you tell them to castrate the animal? Because they're also prohibited from doing that. But the muzzle animal, maybe you're allowed to tell them.
Like if the Jew was benefiting from the whole situation, it wouldn't be allowed. But if the boys,
So that was our question. If a Jew is benefiting, would it be allowed? That's the question. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to tell a non-Jew to do work. But what about other things? Maybe you are allowed. That was the question. So we said, well, you see from that you can't have them castrate an animal because even when they steal it, we put a penalty on them. He said, no, that's because they themselves are not allowed to. Yeah. Okay. Sava Rava Lamemar. Rav understood.
So is this now one of the Nochai?
According to Reb Chitka, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That you would add in this extra thing. I mean, unless it went under another category.
So he would have 8 at least.
Yeah. Either 8 or unless it went it was a subcategory of one of the other, which I don't know.
here he holds that
It's number 8. Yeah, there's other opinions in Sanhedrin that go up to close to 50, I think. Yeah.
I think that is the 7 plus like all like the common sense one out of the 6 or 2. Like
That's there are also ones that are common sense, but then there's I think there's others like right.
This could fit in there. Don't do the others what you would want to be done to you. Just castrate animals.
We'll get to Sanhedrin and yeah. Okay. Okay. Savar Rav Lamema Yimachru L'Shchit.
Isn't the Sanhedrin and shaking us at the door, are they the same thing?
Sort of. That was just a short period. Not shaking us like that. It was a short period of that time when there were 120 members of this great assembly. Sanhedrin was 7. Many years it was a Sanhedrin. For a short period of time, there was this great assembly. So Rava understood that he can't even sell it to someone else to do plowing, which that would be a benefit because it was castrated. It would maybe works better or something. Because if you sell it for plowing, then it would be more expensive. You would be benefiting from it. Amalei Abaya says, no, you don't have to be so strict. It's enough that you have to sell it, and that's enough of a penalty. Okay, now the Gemara says when it comes to selling it, pshita. You sell it to your son, that's an adult, that's considered like someone else. Let's say you sell it to your son, that's a minor. Ravachi Asar, Ravashi Shari, it's a machlekes. What's going to be with the young child? Goes on, you put it under someone else's name. That's what it looks like. Just a transfer name. Like, do you satisfy this penalty by just doing that? Like, how serious is this? Well, Gemara says, Mareimar, Marzutra, Varmila Hanu Chechsidi, Mechalfi Adadi. Mareimar Marzutra, and some say there were two Chasidim that would actually exchange it one with another. The non-Jews would steal their animals, castrate them, return them, and now they weren't allowed to use it, so they would exchange it with each other. These were pious men. Apparently, the way they viewed it is, yeah, there is a prohibition, but it's easy to get around it. Oy Rami Barchama. Then we have some questions about what's considered muzzling the animal. Rami Barchama asks, let's say you put a thorn into its mouth, it makes it difficult for it to eat. Is that considered muzzling? So the Gemara asks, of course that's considered muzzling. We're talking about where it got a thorn in its mouth. You didn't take it out. Mahu, do you violate the laws of muzzling by not removing a thorn that came in just by unintentionally? Here, if you have a lion sit right outside where it's threshing, so the animal's afraid to eat it, has to keep looking to make sure it's not going to get eaten. It's not going to get eaten itself. So, but because of that, it can't eat. So mahu, what's the din? The Gemara says here, if you put a animal over there, the lion, fish, of course it's gonna. I don't know how you're handling that lion, but of course that's considered muzzling. There is a lion outside. The question is, you didn't chase it away. So what's going to happen then? Let's say you just put its child outside. It can't. It wants to go to the child, or so. Mahu, what's the din? Let's say it was very thirsty before it started. You didn't give it water. Mahu, so it doesn't want to eat more because it wants to drink first. Paras la katablia al-gabidisha puts a hide, some sort of leather blanket, over the grain, so it doesn't even see the grain. Is that acceptable? So psheit mi'achada, we can answer one of these questions, a bunch of questions he asked. The Tanya was starting to Brayser, Rashai balapara. This is talking about someone that's renting out his animal. The renter is permitted. He can do like this. Someone's coming to him to rent the animal, so he starves the animal for the day before, so that when it goes to this guy's house, it eats up. Why should I feed it? You're going to work it. Let it eat all your grain. I know you're not allowed to put a muzzle on it anyway. So, is he allowed to do that? The answer is that he is allowed to. Now, a homeowner is allowed to open up a bale of straw so that it doesn't eat from the grain. You see that you're allowed to do something to cover the grain. I guess he's putting the bale of straw on top of the grain. That's what the Gemara is thinking here. So that it's going to eat this instead of that. So maybe the same thing. You're allowed to put the hide on it, so it can't get to it. So one second. That's coming up in the Gemara. So you see, we have a proof. The Gemara answers, Shani Hasam. Shani Hasam, over there it's different, because over there it's actually eating. When you put the hide on it, so it's not eating, but over here you're feeding it, which should be acceptable. If you want, you can say differently, but it doesn't mean that you're allowed to spread the straw over the grain. It means Rashai Balabais. You fed it beforehand. If you feed it beforehand, then it's not going to eat later on. That's a different story. You're not blocking the threshing grain. It's not like a muzzle. It's what you fed before, so now it's full. It's going to eat less. Okay.
I feel like with a lion, though, the animal's just going to run away.
Yeah, I don't know how they're keeping it in there. Maybe it does want to run away, but you're holding it there, so it just keeps like moving, and that's how the threshing is done. Boy mine, yeah, is that what you meant? This last answer. Boy mine Rabbi Yonasan me Rabbi Simai. Rabbi Yonasan has a question for Rabbi Simai. It says Chisman bibachutz mahu. When it says you're not allowed to muzzle an animal when it's threshing, maybe that's only while it's threshing. let's say before it does the threshing, you put the muzzle on, and then when it goes into thresh, it's already muzzled. Shar b'disha yam rachmana. It says an ox while it's in its threshing or while it's threshing. Am rachmana. That's what Hashem says. And this is not you put on the muzzle before it was threshing. Maybe means you shouldn't thresh while it's muzzled. Am rachmana. That's what Hashem says. Yeah. It's like a question of active or passive. Okay. Is it allowed to be muzzled while it's threshing? Amalei, so he responds, Reb Sima, he responds to Rabbi Yonasan, says, Mi beis avicha talamed. You can learn from your father's house. Apparently, that Rabbi Yonasan was a Kayan. On the side of my Gemara, it says in Sanhedrin, it appears that he really wasn't a Kayan. But he says, Mi beis avicha talamed, from your father's house. I mean, I could answer that question by saying that maybe his mother was, his father's mother was a Kayan or something. It's Beis Avicha from your father's house. Doesn't mean that he was actually a Kayan. But it says over there, it says, Yayin v'sheichar al teisht. You shouldn't drink wine or hard liquor. Ata v'necha itach b'vayachem. You and your sons with you when you enter into the holies. B'vayachem udaser. It should be only when you enter in, you can't drink wine. Mishta male, but let's say I drank the wine outside, right? So the police ask you if you're drinking and driving. They say, no, I drank before I got in the car.
What do they say?
It's not gonna fly. They just take the thing and then yeah.
So, Mishari, that should be good. The only problem is it says lahavdil bein hakodesh ubein hachol. You have to make a distinction between what's holy and what's mundane. Amar Rachmana, and that means that you have to be able to separate it by you have to be able to separate. And if you're gonna have drunk before, then that would be a problem. Over there, what it means is that when you enter in, you should not be drunk. It doesn't mean that you can't drink when you're in the temple. It means when you enter in the temple, you can't have drunken either. So too, the same thing over here. When you're threshing, you can't be muzzled. The animal can't be muzzled. Doesn't have to be. It's not just a prohibition of not to muzzle it while it's threshing, but it can't be muzzled, passive, while it's threshing.
Are you allowed to eat in
Well, there was a problem with bringing in certain foods. They were allowed to bring. They ate sacrifices.
Oh, inside?
Yeah. Actually, certain sacrifices had to be inside.
Do they have like a long table, like a long Shabbos table?
You weren't allowed to sit.
Oh.
You would have to eat standing.
Uh-huh.
But you're not supposed to.
I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, they had doctors for the Kayanim.
I thought I had to do.
They're doctors for the Kayanim because they ate a lot of meat, and their feet were bare. They had to walk on the marble without socks and shoes. What is it?
Borbus.
What Borbus means?
Borbus. Yeah,
Is that Yiddish?
so the Yiddish or Polish. All I know is I kept on hearing it as a kid.
Borbus?
Borbus. I don't know what it
What does
was.
it mean?
It means barefoot.
That's not a good thing. It's pretty
Right.
good.
Well,
No,
In
Yeah,
Europe,
his
they didn't
didn't.
want you to walk
Barefoot.
barefoot. It either meant that you were too poor that you didn't have shoes, or that maybe they could get
a nail or something. Oh, really?
thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was somebody.
So it's a negative thing.
What? No. You weren't allowed to bring mundane things into the temple. But I think they did have condiments there. I think they were allowed to eat it together with, like, what is that? Oh yeah. Yeah, we learned it. I don't
Mustard and
remember the
ketchup on the
details.
side
Yeah,
of the coconut.
that's right. Started in a brisa. So when the muzzle's an animal, he doesn't do the threshing, but his friend does the threshing, but he did the muzzling. Someone that puts two animals, attaches them to a two different animals, from two different species. He puts them together to pull a wagon or something, so that which is a prohibition. But he doesn't actually move the wagon. Someone else does that. He's puttered, but he set it up. He's putter vein aloika. The only person that gets malchus, that gets lashes, is the guy that actually threshes with it, or the guy that moves the animal. That's going to be the problem, not the guy that set it up. It's my statement. Kisma b'kol.
That is putting a stumbling block, though.
Yeah.
So he gets
Yeah, but you don't get lashes, I think.
Where's he get?
Pink slip. He gets a pink slip.
Would there be lashes that he could if he didn't know about it?
No, you have to be warned. Yeah. So let's say the animal is about to eat. It's not muzzled, it's doing the threshing. And you start shouting at it. Every time you shout at it, every time it tries to put its mouth into the food, you shout at it. You disturb it from eating. Benhiga bakal, or let's say you don't actually move the animal, you just keep shouting at it so it starts running. Rabbi Yochanan says that's considered an action. Rabbi says no, it's not. It's just your mouth. Rabbi Yochanan says that moving the mouth is considered an action. So an action, a negative prohibition with an action gets lashes. That's why Rabbi Yochanan says you get lashes. Rabbi says you're exempt because the sound is not considered, the voice is not considered an action. You didn't do an action. They only get malchus if you do a negative prohibition with the action. Rabbi Yochanan says, 1 second, I'll prove it to you that it's considered an action. Because when it comes to Tamura, which is substituting a animal, a mundane animal for a sacrifice, it says, it's not that you're allowed to substitute an animal for a sacrifice. But if you did it, it actually becomes substituted, becomes consecrated. And you also get lashes. Well, how do you get lashes for that? It was just a verbal. I say this animal should be instead of this. Rabbi Yochanan's right. It's proof to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says that you get lashes just for saying words. Amarle, Rish Lakish responds, Hamani Rabbi Yehuda, he says, no. That's that Mishnah, which is the first Mishnah in Tamura. That's the following the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Damar, Lav Shem by Maisa Laikinalav. He holds that you don't need an action. The opinion of Rabbi Yehuda holds you don't need an action to get Malchus. Kumar says, Rabbi Yehuda. Can you really establish it like Rabbi Yehuda? Vaktani Reisha. But if you look at that Mishnah in Tamura, it says, Akol Mamir Nechad Anashim Vechad Anashim. It says that everyone is able to affect Tamura, whether it's a man or a woman. And we asked, why did you say everyone? What are you coming to include by everyone if you say everyone, whether it's a man, whether it's a woman? So why do you say everyone? You just included everyone without even saying everyone. What's the hakol? Hakol is lasuya yairish. Coming to tell us that if a father consecrated an animal and the son comes along and wants to substitute that animal for another animal, so that is going to be substituted. And the Gemara says, the like Rabbi Yehuda. And it doesn't follow Rabbi Yehuda. Because the Rabbi Yehuda actually holds that a inheritor, the child, is not allowed to, is not able, that's not allowed to, no one is allowed to substitute, but he's not even able to affect the Tumura, even if he tries, because it wasn't his animal. It's only your own animal that you can do, according to Rabbi Yehuda. The inheritor, the father passed away, the inheritor cannot substitute it. So that Mishnah cannot be Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda would hold that the inheritor cannot substitute. And that Mishnah says Hakol, which is including an inheritor, that he can. And he also, Rabbi Yehuda adds in that Yerush and Saimach, that if he's bringing his father's animal, he doesn't lean on the animal. The Gemara answers, how do we resolve this problem for Rish Lakish, which looks like that an action could be verbal as well? So it says, it's not a problem. That Mishnah follows Rabbi Yehuda's view regarding lashes without an action, but it doesn't follow Rabbi Yehuda's view regarding a inheritor. Okay. Tan Rabbanan. Borvus.
I used to say Borvis, but I didn't understand the
About muzzling a tractor. You just
Don't put gasoline in it. Someone muzzles a cow, b'dashba, and he threshes with it. Like he gets lashes, and Mishalim Dalit Kabin, Lapara, Gimel Kabin, Lachamar. He has to pay to the owner because he didn't supply it with food while it was threshing. He has to pay a certain amount of grain to the owner. It's either 4 kav for a cow, that's how much it could have eaten, and 3 kav for a donkey. Gemara asks a question, 1 second. Look at what's happening here. The person that did this is getting lashes and he's obligated to pay. But we have a rule, usually we say that you only get the more severe punishment, you don't get both punishments. Right? You only get one punishment. It's kamle b'deramine. You get the larger one and you don't get the smaller one. Amar Abaya says, Hamani Reb Meir, he damalaikum mishalim. You must be following Reb Meir. Reb Meir holds that the person can get lashes and also have to pay. I wouldn't say that by the death penalty, but he says it by lashes. He's talking about Edim Zaymamin, that if witnesses testify, so they get and then the 2 other witnesses come and say, how could you say that? You were with us. So 2 things happen. First of all, they get lashes, and also they have to pay whatever they intended to cause harm. So you see, you have to get lashes and they pay, like a mashalim. Rava gives a different teretz than Abaya. Wow. He says, second. It's a salaf. This is to satisfy the law from heaven. And it's saying like this. When it says that you're not allowed to give certain animals become prohibited to be used as a sacrifice. One is an animal that was given to a woman for prostitution, and another one is as payment. Another one is an animal that was exchanged for a dog. Now, let's say the woman that woman that he's living with, that he's paying with this animal, which now is prohibited to become a sacrifice. That woman could be a not married woman, a single woman. But let's say it's not. Let's say it's a serious prohibition. Let's say it's his mother. So we say like this, that even though there's a capital punishment here, nevertheless, that animal still gets the status of an esnan, which can't be used as a sacrifice. What does this mean for us? Let me see your comment. Now, in this case of incest, the act of cohabitation which obligates the son to pay the harlot the wage that was agreed upon also subjects him to the death penalty for incest. In the law, in such cases, one cannot be subject to both payment and execution for the same crime. Rather, only the more severe penalty is administered. Why then, if the son does pay his mother the wages promised, is the animal disqualified? It means only that the court cannot enforce the obligation. The criminal remains legally obligated to pay however, and must do so to fulfill his obligation to heaven. That is why the animal he gives his mother as her wage assumes the status of a harlot's wage, for it was given in fulfillment of a legal obligation to pay, albeit that it's not enforceable. The same principle is regarded with muzzling. The double penalty, prevents the court from enforcing the monetary obligation against the muzzler. However, he still remains obligated to pay. That's what we're saying. That they don't enforce that payment, but he's still obligated. Okay, next answer goes like this. Rav Papa Amar, no. Yeah, Rav Papa has another answer. Rav Papa Mishas Mashiach Chayav Labim Neiseh. When the person took the animal, the renter took the animal, he already became obligated to feed it. So that payment started right away, the 4 kav. However, Milka Leilaki at Shas Chasima, but that he only gets the lashes in the time when he muzzles it by the threshing. So because they came at different times, so we don't have a problem of Kamleim B'Dramine. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, Hani mili boy mine the bay Rav Papa Barabba. Boy minoi the bay Rav Papa Barabba. Rav Papa, who I thought was Rav Papa Barabba, says that the yeshiva of Rav Papa Barabba, so obviously Rav Papa is not Rav Papa Barabba, it's different Rav Papa. They asked him a question. They asked him questions, and I answered them that it's prohibited. So one of them I was correct, and one of them I wasn't correct. The one that was, I'm sorry. They asked, was the question that they asked. Are you allowed to use milk in kneading the dough? And I told them that you're not allowed to, which was the halacha. The Tanya taught in the Brisa, you're not allowed to mix milk into dough. And if you do, you're not allowed to eat the bread because people may come to sin by eating it together with meat. Bread, yeah, it's part of. And yeah. The Gemara talks about, where was it? And it's a quoting here. That you can do the shape of there's two, cantura, it says. Right.
The other shape.
That's the similarly, you can't smear fat onto the oven because you're going to bake bread in. And if you do smear the fat over there, then the bread is going to be prohibited until you heat up the oven, which means until you kasher it. Because you may end up eating that bread with milk, because bread goes with both, and people won't assume that it's fleshik or melchik. So he answered that one correctly. The other question that they asked, are you allowed to put, you're not allowed to crossbreed animals. You're allowed to put 2 different animals into the pen from 2 different species, male and female, into a pen. But not to actually mate them, but just to put them into one pen and close the door. Essentially, it's mating, but you're not actually doing the act itself. The animal husbandry.
What if the animals the cat
Can't mate.
compatible? Yeah.
Then they won't have any results.
They still might mate.
Put like a dog and a cat.
One of them won't stay there, the cat.
I don't know. They had this thing with this great earthquake, and the things in the zoo broke open the gates of so these animals went running. So they went running wild. Anyway, there was like a bear and a rabbit and a goat or something. What was the animal? Yeah, a bear, a rabbit, and a wolf. Bear, a rabbit, and a wolf. So bear, they fall into like this pit. So the bear turns to the rabbit after a few hours. He says, I'm starting to feel very hungry. The rabbit says, I would not start up with the wolf. It could be dangerous.
I heard it different. I heard that there was a snake and a rabbit, and they ended up meeting in the woods, and they hugged each other. And then the snake said to the rabbit, "Oh, you warm and fuzzy, you must be a rabbit." And he said, "Correct." And then the rabbit's the other one says, "Oh, you're cold and slimy, you must be a lawyer."
Okay.
She's not here. I can take whatever.
So the second question is, are you allowed to put them into a pen together? I told them that you're not allowed to. The law kills, but that's not actually correct. Because Shmuel says, if there's witnesses that are coming to testify that a man and a woman were sinning together, you don't have to actually see that they're sinning. You have to see them laying in a position that's a position of sin. You don't have to actually see the organs inside. But when it comes to mating, to animal husbandry, you have to actually do the act of putting the organs together. And so therefore, when he was strict about it, he was actually incorrect. That's what he's claiming. Remember Barami, that's what we used to call Yassi. So
you hear that, Moshe? Achterboy.
Rav Barami says, if it would say just you're not allowed to mate animals, you can't mate animals.
I always wait to see the Achterboy thing. Doesn't come often.
That's right. Then I would have said that you're not allowed to hold an animal when it's mating. Even if it's not a different species, you're not allowed to do the mating. The pasuk says no, you're only not allowed to do kalayim. You can't do a crossbreed. But what that would tell me is that if it is kalayim, you're not even allowed to hold the animal. You're holding it by the horns or something. You're not actually doing the mating. So I would have thought that you're not allowed to hold the animal when it's mating. You shouldn't be around when it's mating. You're not allowed to hold the animal. It says no, it's only if it's a crossbreed. But okay, a crossbreed, you're not allowed to hold the animal, even if you're not doing the mating. You can't even hold the animal. The Gemara says no. And it says holding it, it means actually to insert the organ inside. But so why are you saying holding? You're not holding, you're inserting it in. Lishna Malia, it's just trying to speak clean. It wasn't giving you all those details. Amar Rav Yehuda. Yehuda says, Min b'minai mutal hachnes k'mechal b'shriferes b'afil mishum pritzus aleka my time vidita tarit. Rav Yehuda says that you're allowed to do animal husbandry. The farmer or whoever does this is allowed to put the organs together of two animals that are the same species. You say maybe that's not appropriate. Says no, you're doing this. This is your business. This is not even something that he's going to think about. This is just how they procreate. That's how you need to get more animals in this farm. Masav Rav Achtai Barami has a question. It only says that you're allowed to hold the animal. It goes like this. If the pasuk would say that you can't mate animals, then I would have thought that you can't even hold the animal when the male is coming on top of it. But the pasuk says kalayim, only a crossbreed. That's where the prohibition is. Okay, but if it would be its own species, then it would be permissible. So what would be permissible? It would be permissible to hold it. We're going the opposite way now. But to actually insert it inside, that we never discussed. Maybe that would be prohibited. The Gemara says, no, my achiza, when it says holding it, what does it mean? Achnasa means entering the organ inside. My kaile achiza, so why do you say achiza holding it? Gemara answers, that was the clean language. Amar Rav Ashi.
There's no concept of rape by animals.
No.
I know it sounds weird, but when you're saying you can't hold down the female so that the male can do that, it almost sounds like you're not allowed to do that because the male is raping the female, even though it's an animal.
There's no concept.
It's not what.
Right.
Chimpanzees, which are the female wouldn't make with any monkey, it's just the males would chase the other monkeys away.
Uh-huh.
So she's only left with one?
The males
The
are
male would chase
territorial.
them,
Right.
That's your answer.
Okay.
Every other time.
Amar Rav Ashi, Rashi says, "Ham milsa boy minoi debei Rav Nechemia Reish Galusa." The house of Rav Nechemia Reish Galusa. They asked me this question: Ma'ol lahachnes min uminoi b'shein min ladir. Okay. Here in the last case, we said that we're allowed to put two different species into the same. And he answered that you were allowed to. He said that you're not allowed to, and we said that, and he claimed that that was the Leki Elchasa. You really should be allowed to. Now he's saying, now they're asking a question. Let's say there's three animals here, two of the same species and one that's not a different species. So now if they're going to mate, maybe they can mate the species, the same one. They have a partner if they want. Even the kamine basar minigar, since it has its own species there, it's going to follow its own species. Idilma afilu hachilai. Or maybe, nevertheless, they shouldn't do that because maybe they're going to go for the other one. Partially surid like Kilsai answered that it was prohibited, and but that wasn't the halacha. That wasn't correct. It really should be permissible. Why did I answer that? Mishum pritzusa da'avdi, because I thought that maybe the slaves would try to experiment on mating it with the other species. That's why it should be prohibited. But the truth is that it's permissible. Okay, let's leave it over here. Should we learn tonight?